It was just another cold evening in the city, the kind where the wind cuts through your jacket no matter how many layers you're wearing. The sidewalks were crowded with people rushing home, heads down, lost in their own worlds. Among them was Jamal, a 17-year-old boy with a worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder. He had just finished his shift at the diner, tired but still moving with that quiet determination he carried everywhere. Jamal wasn't one to complain. Life hadn't been easy, but he had learned early on that nobody was going to hand him anything. So he worked hard. Between school, part-time jobs, and taking care of his little sister, he barely had time to breathe. But that night, something was about to happen that would change everything. As he stepped onto the packed bus, he immediately noticed her, a woman standing near the front, holding onto the railing with one hand, the other resting protectively on her stomach. She was pregnant, visibly uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other as the bus swayed. Jamal glanced around. Not a single person looked up. Everyone was either glued to their phones or pretending not to see. His mother had raised him better than that. Without hesitation, he stood up and motioned for her to take his seat. She looked at him, surprised, as if she hadn't expected kindness from a stranger, especially not from someone like him. "Thank you," she said softly, lowering herself into the seat with a sigh of relief. Jamal just nodded and grabbed onto the pole to steady himself. He didn't think much of it. It was just the right thing to do. But as the bus rumbled forward, the woman reached into her bag, pulled out a small folded piece of paper, and pressed it into his hand. "Read it later," she whispered, her eyes full of something he couldn't quite place. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. Jamal hesitated but nodded, tucking the note into his pocket. He didn't know it yet, but that little slip of paper held words that would change his life forever. What was written inside? Why did this woman, a complete stranger, feel the need to give him a note? And what would happen when Jamal finally opened it? Stay tuned, because what came next was something nobody could have expected. Jamal clutched the small, folded note in his pocket as he gripped the overhead bar, steadying himself against the jerking motion of the bus. He told himself he would read it later once he got home, but curiosity was already gnawing at him. He glanced at the woman out of the corner of his eye. She was staring out the window, one hand resting on her stomach as if lost in thought. There was something about her, something that made him wonder why she had given him the note in the sow. First place. The bus rumbled through the city streets past glowing shop signs and flickering traffic lights. Jamal's stop was coming up, but he hesitated. He didn't want to read the note standing outside in the cold, and the thought of waiting until he got home felt impossible. His fingers brushed over the paper again, debating whether he should just open it now. But before he could decide, the bus jerked to a stop, and he had to tighten his grip to keep from stumbling. The doors hissed open and he sighed, shaking his head at himself. He was overthinking it. It was probably just a simple thank you. Nothing life-changing. With a final glance at the woman, he stepped off the bus, pulling his hood over his head, as the night air wrapped around him. The streets were quieter here, the hum of the city fading into the distance. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows as he made his way toward the small apartment he shared with his mom and little sister. Jamal's neighborhood wasn't the safest, but he had learned how to move through it, head down, minding his business. The key was not looking like a target. He walked quickly, keeping his hands in his pockets, feeling the note crinkle between his fingers. His mom would be waiting for him. She always worried when he worked late, but they needed the extra money. By the time he reached his building, his stomach was growling. The elevator was broken, again, so he took the stairs, his legs aching with each step. When he finally reached the apartment, he unlocked the door quietly, not wanting to wake his sister. The small living room was dimly lit by the glow of the TV. His mom was dozing on the couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Jamal felt a pang of guilt. She worked too hard, barely got any rest, and still worried about him on top of it all. He set his bag down, grabbed a bottle of water from the kitchen, and finally, pulled out the note. His heart pounded as he unfolded. The paper, the handwriting was neat, careful, like someone who had thought hard about what they wanted to say. You have no idea how much your kindness means to me. If you're willing, please call this number. I need to speak with you. It's important. Jamal stared at the note, his mind racing. Why? Why would this woman, a stranger, ask him to call her? What could possibly be so important? A part of him wanted to ignore it. He had enough on his plate without getting caught up in someone else's problems. But another part of him, something, deep in his gut, told him that this wasn't just some random note. It meant something. He turned the paper over looking for more, but that was it. Just a phone number. Jamal let out a slow breath, running a hand over his face. He was exhausted. He should just sleep and deal with it tomorrow. But sleep didn't come easily that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind playing through all the possibilities. Who was she? And what did she want from him? The next morning, he woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of his little sister humming in the kitchen. His mom was already dressed for work, moving around the tiny apartment like she always did, efficient, focused, determined to keep their world running. Jamal barely tasted his breakfast. The note sat on the table next to him, folded neatly, as if waiting for him to make a decision. His mom noticed. "You okay, baby?" she asked, glancing at him while she packed her lunch. "Yeah," he said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Not, even to himself. She gave him a look, the kind only mothers can give, the kind that saw straight through him, but she didn't press. She had enough to worry about. Jamal grabbed his phone and the note as he headed out. The bus ride to school felt longer than usual. His fingers hovered over the number more than once, but he couldn't bring himself to call. Not yet. By the time lunch rolled around, his best friend Marcus noticed something was up. "Yo, what's with you today?" Marcus asked, stealing a fry from Jamal's tray. "You look like you saw a ghost." Jamal hesitated. He didn't really want to explain, but Marcus had been his best friend since middle school. If anyone could help him figure this out, it was him. He pulled out the note and slid it across the table. Marcus picked it up, reading it with a raised eyebrow. "This some kind of secret mission or what?" he joked. But when Jamal didn't laugh, his expression turned serious. "Wait, you actually think this is something big?" "I don't know, man," Jamal admitted. "It just feels weird. Why would she ask me to call her? I just gave her my seat. It wasn't a big deal." Marcus leaned back, thinking. "Maybe she wants to pay you back or something. Like rich people love doing dramatic stuff." Jamal frowned. She didn't seem like she was just being nice. She looked, I don't know, like it was serious. Marcus shrugged. "Only one way to find out." Jamal stared at the number again. His fingers twitched. Finally, before he could change his mind, he pulled out his phone and dialed. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Hello?" It was her. The woman from the bus. Jamal hesitated, suddenly unsure of what to say. Hey. It's Jamal, from the bus." There was silence, then a sharp inhale, like she had been waiting for this call. "Jamal, thank you for calling," she said, her voice steady but holding something else beneath the surface. "What's this about?" he asked, keeping his voice careful, guarded. There was another pause. Then she spoke. "I need to see you, please, it's urgent." Jamal's stomach tightened. He had been right. This wasn't just some thank you note. Something was going on, and whatever it was about to change his life. Jamal gripped his phone tighter, his heartbeat picking up. The woman's voice carried something heavy, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He didn't know this, lady. He had done one small thing, given up his seat, and now she was talking like this was life or death. "See me?" he repeated, trying to make sense of it. "Why?" There was a pause on the other end, then a quiet sigh. I can't explain everything over the phone, but I promise it's important." Jamal glanced around. He was still in the cafeteria, the buzz of lunchtime conversation swirling around him. But it felt like he was in his own bubble now, separate from everything else. Something about this didn't sit right, but at the same time, His gut told him to listen. I don't even know you, he said, keeping his voice low. I know, she admitted. But you're the only person I can turn to right now. That made no sense. Jamal was just a kid from the South Side, juggling school, work, and making sure his little sister had food on the table. Why would a grown woman, who clearly had money judging by her clothes, be reaching out to him like this? He rubbed a hand over his face. Look, I don't know what you're dealing with, but I got my own stuff to worry about. I'll explain everything, she cut in. Just meet me, please. The way she said it, almost desperate, made Jamal pause. He wanted to walk away, pretend none of this was happening, but his gut wouldn't let him. Where? He asked before he could stop himself. She gave him an address, some fancy coffee shop in a part of town he didn't usually go to. Too expensive, too many people who looked at him like he didn't belong. Jamal sighed. I don't got money for no coffee. That's not a problem, she said quickly. Just come. He hesitated. Every logical part of him said to forget about it. But there was another part, a smaller part, that was curious. What could be so serious that she needed to meet him in person? All right, he finally said. I'll be there after school. Thank you, she said, and for some reason her voice sounded relieved. The line went dead. Jamal stared at his phone, feeling like he had just stepped into something bigger than he could understand. Marcus leaned forward. Bro, what was that? Jamal shook his head. I don't even know. The rest of the day passed in a blur. He tried to focus in class, but his mind kept going back to the woman. What was she going to tell him? Why did she need him, of all people? By the time school let out, his nerves were getting the best of him, but he had already agreed, so he hopped on a bus and headed across town. When he arrived, the coffee shop looked exactly like he expected. Big glass windows, people in business suits typing on laptops, the smell of expensive coffee in the air. He felt out of place before he even stepped inside. But there she was, sitting near the back, hands wrapped around a cup, eyes scanning the room. The moment she saw him, she stood up. Jamal, she said, relief clear on her face. He walked over slowly. Yeah, I'm here. She gestured to the seat across from her. Please sit. Jamal hesitated, then pulled out the chair, keeping his guard up. For a moment, she just looked at him, like she was gathering her thoughts. Then she took a deep breath. My name is Claire, she said, and what I'm about to tell you, it's going to sound crazy. Jamal didn't say anything, just waited. Claire glanced around, as if checking to see if anyone was listening, then leaned in slightly. I'm in danger, she said, voice barely above a whisper, and I think you're the only person who can help me. Jamal blinked. Me? She nodded. Yes. He shook his head, confused. Lady, I don't even know you. How am I supposed to help? She swallowed hard. Because I think someone is following me, watching me, and I can't trust anyone in my world. Jamal felt the weight of her words, but he still didn't understand. Why me, though? Claire hesitated, then pulled something out of her bag, a small, folded-up picture. She slid it across the table. Jamal looked down at it and his stomach twisted. It was a picture of him, not from today, not from school, but from last week. Him walking home, headphones in, completely unaware that someone had taken this photo. His fingers clenched the paper. What the? I found it in my mailbox this morning, Claire said quietly. And I don't know who put it there, but whoever it was, they wanted me to see it. Jamal's heart was racing now. This wasn't just some random thank you. This wasn't just about a seat on the bus. Something bigger was happening. And for some reason, he was right in the middle of it.